Welcome in, Dwayne Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo. And today's a special day. You know us as the football guys, but we want to show we got a lot more to talk about. And coming up this next week is the NBA All-Star Game. And so we want to dive into some major NBA topics, along with, the trade deadline was this past week, along with we want to talk about the playoffs. It's only a couple months away. And so I can't wait to get down to it. Genoa, how you doing today?
Dwayne Nation, Justin, I am doing good. As we say goodbye to one sports, we're entering another one. We have another road to the playoffs, which take a couple of months or so, Justin. I'm so excited to dive into this basketball season. And hey, man, let's get going, man. This is going to be a pretty interesting playoff run, Justin. What do you think so far in this NBA season?
It's been very exciting. I feel like, a couple years ago I kind of fell off of it, lost, just
Mhm.
my team wasn't balling, so I feel like, there was some just not as engaged. But now it's big time. Our Rockets we're struggling, but we started off hot. We have a new direction with Ime Udoka. But no, just in the whole perspective of the league, there's so much going on. A bunch of teams really have a great chance of winning a title this year. And even the biggest storyline, like the Golden State Warriors dynasty, they're a 10 seed right now. That is just un unexpected of a team with such great players. They're kind of, falling apart, maybe due to age or just, inner turmoil, it seems. But
Mhm.
I can't wait to jump into it. I really want to start off with, big last week was a big week. It's the NBA trade deadline. Teams were firing off, moves back and forth, and we had some big ones. And I want to start with the Knicks. They've always recently they've been kind of meddling around playoff contention, but now they make a big move. They've been on a good streak. They are the fourth seed right now, and they make a deal for Bohan Bogdanovic from the Pistons, who has always been a really strong role player. But going to Detroit, they're just not a good team right now. And so he gets moved happily. Poor Quinn Grimes, if you saw on social media, he was like, I do not want to go to Detroit. And guess what happens? He gets moved to Detroit. But I think it's a really good move for the Knicks. They need a guy like Bohan Bogdanovic. Alec Burks, too, is still a very solid vet to have in your locker room. And so they get those two guys. They give up Evan Fournier, who is just he's become washed in recent seasons. Brian Arcidiacono, Malachi Flynn, just not too big of names that they sent out. But they get players that are definitely going to have some pretty big minutes for their playoff stretch. What are your thoughts on this move for the Knicks?
I love this move for the Knicks. When you look at what they've done in the past month, they traded for OG Anunoby, who's a great player who's done very solid things for them in their, I would say, 14 to 17 game stretch. Secondly, I love what they gave away. When you look at Evan Fournier, he hasn't really been the player he was in Orlando. He went to Boston a couple years ago, kind of struggled, didn't really find his groove, and then he went to the Knicks and really in and out of the rotation for the Knicks. They looked at Malachi Flynn, who was pretty good in Toronto a few years back. Quentin Grimes was very on and off, very out of the rotation. And they also gave away 2 second-round picks, which in NBA is pretty good thing to give away for a guy like Bohan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks, who's been around. So I love this Knicks team. Little by little, I'm starting to trust the process with the Knicks as they have Brunson, who's an All-Star and an MVP candidate, Julius Randle, who's really a star, an All-Star, and they have Tom Thibodeau, who's a pretty veteran head coach in this league. So I love the Knicks as a strong fourth seed in the playoffs going in, Justin. I do. This is a hot take, Justin, but I like the Knicks a little bit better than the Milwaukee Bucks, who just fired their head coach and had to bring in Doc Rivers on a one-day express shipping and getting him on the team, and he's kind of struggling, kind of going, I think 2-5, I believe, in their 7 games with Doc. So I do like the Knicks going forward into the playoffs, Justin.
No, and they kind of been missing a piece like that. They have Brunson. Randall's kind of been hard to count on in the playoffs, particularly. But Bohan, he's had playoff experience with Utah, and so and he's just kind of a guy that is very, to me, in my eyes, very consistent, a very consistent player. You know, he's averaging
Mhm.
20 plus on the Pistons. And even though that team is young and inexperienced, he was kind of a leader for them. And so I really, you know, the Knicks made a move that they kind of needed. They didn't get the biggest, flashiest guy, but a guy that can really, you know, you can count on in those deep playoff runs. So, and then you're talking about Milwaukee. You know, they've kind of been on a struggle session. You know,
Yeah.
they got rid of their coach, which we never see early on in a season. You know, they were second, I believe, in the East when they fired Adrian Griffin.
Yeah.
So there was really some inside the organization, you know, issues that caused that, and then they bring in a veteran head coach in Doc Rivers, who I've liked. He's never been a championship guy. He's always kind of jumped like been a middle. You know, he'll make the playoffs, but he's not going to win you a title. He did that in on the Clippers and then the Sixers and now in Milwaukee. So it's a very strong take to you know, vote against Giannis and Dame Lillard, but they're showing it. They're showing a very good team, and now with Bohan, you know, his first early start with the Knicks, he's looked good, and so I like that move. And speaking about Milwaukee, they made another move. That you know, brings in Patrick Beverly from the Philadelphia 76ers. And you know, a guy like Patrick Beverly, who is a real, you know, a energy guy, you know, brings a lot of you know, energy in the locker room. He also, you know, he creates a lot of enemies. You know, we've all seen that in his time in Houston and to LA, and then, you know, LA again, all around the league he's kind of been. But he gets moved to Milwaukee, and I know him and Dame Lillard have butted heads in their past, but they're, you know, they gotta knock that out, and Milwaukee kind of needs another guy that brings a lot of energy to the team. They get rid of Cameron Payne. He used to be on the Suns, then he went to you know, Milwaukee, and now he's going to Philadelphia, which he's kind of fallen off. I think he used to be you know, kind of a underrated piece for the Suns, but I haven't seen you know, a super exciting season for him in Milwaukee. So he gets a fresh start in Philadelphia, which I you know, I like that move. They really, yeah, we'll jump into even more later for the Sixers, but they're jumping into some more scoring outlets. You know, we'll talk about Buddy Hield in a little bit, but you know, they get rid of Beverly, they get rid of that, you know, defensive presence a little bit. But I guess, you know, that's what the Bucks needed. I'm not, you know, it's not a crazy difference maker type of move for either side, but you know, what are your thoughts?
I think with the Bucks right now, they're searching for a little bit of an identity, Justin. I feel like, last year where they got rid of Mike Budenholzer, I feel like that guy was really like the voice of the Bucks. The quiet voice, pretty much guiding them to a title in 2021. With the Bucks now, I feel like they fired Adrian Griffin, they bring in Doc Rivers, and Doc Rivers is trying to figure himself out with the Bucks. As Doc Rivers for the first half of this NBA season was behind the booth, calling games on ESPN, and now they bring him in rush hour, and now I think the Bucks front office is kind of trying to establish something. I do believe that Patrick Beverly did play under Doc Rivers and the Clippers for a couple years before they got Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and I think they played with a year or two during the bubble with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. As you remember, in the bubble, Justin, um, Patrick Beverly, called out Damian Lillard, the whole "see you in Cancun" type thing in the bubble. That got a lot of criticism. That next year in the playoffs, and the Clippers, made it again, and I think the Blazers are struggling. So looking at the Bucks right now, I do think they're struggling to find an identity. You have Giannis and you have Damian Lillard, the two superstars. But how can we make this team a collective one and have them become a first seed? Because I think Justin, the Bucks are really trying to become the first seed. They've been the first seed many years in the past 6, 7 years during Giannis's MVP years, and now they're sort of falling off. And I feel like now they're trying to establish some type of tough culture, defensive-minded culture, and I think they're trying to start it off with Patrick Beverly.
And you know, it's hard for, you know, a head coach to come in midway to the season and really, you know, keep a winning a high winning rate when you just get to a whole new team, a whole new, you know, set of staff and players. And so I definitely think it's going to be, you know, an easing in process for the Bucks to really get back on track. And they bring in I think a very strong locker room presence who can kind of unite the team if there's just been any bridges that have been broken between players or between the staff with the failed coaching of Adrian Griffin. And so I think it's a good move for Milwaukee. They become a little bit more interesting. Cam Payne wasn't getting too many minutes, so I
Yeah.
think that's a good move. And then flip on the Sixers, they get Cameron Payne. They make another big move though in Buddy Hield from the Indiana Pacers, which I am very intrigued to your thoughts are. I love that guy. He's a great shooter. So talk to me about Buddy Hield.
Justin, I have been a big fan of Buddy Hield since he was drafted to the Sacramento Kings. I'll never forget one of the first times, NBA games were open after the pandemic for fans to attend. I went to a Spurs versus Kings game. Young De'Aaron Fox, young Buddy Hield, and Tyrese Halliburton was on that team too versus the Spurs with DeJounte Murray, which was another decent young team. And I just love the way Buddy Hield played that game. I think he had about 24, 25 points off about 4 or 5 threes. This guy's an efficient shooter when he gets hot. I feel like he needs the right coaching to get him in the game. But a team like the 76ers is a very interesting surprise with Tyrese Maxey becoming a superstar. I feel like this Buddy here can be a perfect two guard for the Sixers to go along with Tobias Harris. The Sixers team is a great team. They did lose Embiid for a little bit, which we'll probably get into a little later. But I love the addition of Buddy. If they can have Embiid back healthy by the playoffs with that shooting squad, I love Nick Nurse as a head coach. He did many great things in Toronto. Now he's in Philadelphia with Daryl Morey, who we're both familiar with, Justin, who knows how to get the analytics going to all the shooters in the playoffs. So I definitely love Buddy for this team. I definitely think they should keep him going forward to pair him up with Tyrese Maxey.
And you were talking about we're gonna get down to talking about Embiid. I think we should start it right here. He's injured. He's been putting up an MVP type season, but in his absence, they've had Tyrese Maxey. And even though, he's a young superstar, he's absolutely balling. I mean, completely, wild how he's been playing. But I think Buddy Hield is going to be another presence that can help in the scoring department while Embiid is, out. And so I think and for like you were saying, Buddy Hield really needs that coaching. I feel like he's played in Sacramento where they were never really going anywhere, and then he joined Rick Carlisle and in Indiana, and it, again was just he started out with them averaging 18, then he dropped to 16, then it dropped to 12. So it was just getting less and less efficient and less and less production out of him, and so he moves to a team that's going to be a playoff contender. And when Embiid gets back, this team could look very dangerous. I could see a very interesting run for them if they're all fully healthy. But Maxey, just going to Maxey, I mean, he has just been phenomenal. They put their players around him now for just everybody to really succeed because everybody's now going to be drawn to guarding Maxey, locking him up, double teams, all it, and then putting in Buddy Hield to be just a dangerous shooter or just a full-on dangerous scorer is going to be a very interesting thing for the Sixers. So I'm very happy with that move for the Sixers. They're finally making moves to be competitive again. After getting rid of James Harden, they get a piece that's going to put up 18 to 22 points a game for them, and it's a great move. I think it's great, and they right now they are fifth in the East in standings. A couple games away from the Knicks at fourth, and so they're going to need a little bit. I think they want to have home court through at least a series or two. So they have a couple months left, but this move is going to set them in the right direction. And so yeah, Buddy Hield to Philadelphia. They make a move. They get rid of Furkan Korkmaz and Marcus Morris, I believe, which I think Morris was putting in some solid minutes with the team. I saw them when they played the Rockets, and he put up a clutch shot to put the team away. So there's definitely they get rid of him, but he's kind of been a journeyman of in recent years, kind of jumping around from team to team. So he's not somebody that they're gonna miss too much. And then Furkan, he's been bad. I mean, he hasn't really done anything in his career to be super interesting. A handful of years ago, he averaged around 9 points a game, all the way down to this year, 2.5. So that doesn't, change anything for the Sixers. They get rid of a piece that, wasn't really producing, but they get a piece in Buddy Hield that will produce big time. So good move for them. I want to jump into another trade, and I want to move to a team that was pretty active on the trade market, the Dallas Mavericks. They made two pretty big moves. I want you to first talk about the power forward out of Charlotte, PJ Washington. They make a move. Let me give you at least some of the of what was in the trade. They get rid of Grant Williams and Seth Curry and a 2027 first. What are your thoughts on PJ Washington as a Maverick?
Well, Justin, ever since the Mavericks last year traded away Dorian Finney-Smith, I feel like they had a little bit of a hole in their forwards, a little bit of their wings. They need someone to get on the outside so Luka can find them, as well as Kyrie Irving. When you look at PJ Washington, he's been a solid player for the Hornets. The Hornets really haven't been in playoff contention much. They had a pretty much good bona fide star in Miles Bridges before. He had his personal incidents. LaMelo Ball is obviously an all-star and a future possible MVP later down the line, I feel like. But he's been in and out the lineup in the first part of the year. So I feel like the Hornets just never, became competitive. I'm not sure what the sell of Michael Jordan does to the team. I'm not sure if it makes them a better team or a worse. But I just don't think they're competitive. But I do think PJ Washington was always a solid player from the beginning of the time when he got drafted in 20 and 19. Look at this year. He's averaging, almost 14 points and about 5.5 rebounds, which is not too bad for a team if you have, a Kyrie Irving and a Luka Doncic, who is a possible MVP candidate as well, Justin. I love this addition because, like I said, the Mavericks have had a hole a little bit, in their forwards. They brought in Grant Williams this year from Boston, and Grant Williams is always that type of player that could be good, but he's a little goofy. He goofs off a little bit. Good guy, but sometimes, I seen him struggle in the 22 finals with Boston. He couldn't be that guy, that 3-and-D guy to hit some good shots as every team needs if they're going to win the finals, as the Nuggets did. So looking at PJ Washington, I love it for the Mavericks, Justin, and it gives Luka Doncic another weapon to pass it around to.
And some people are going to look at this trade and they're going to be like, they got rid of Grant Williams. He was in the finals not too long ago. They paid him pretty good to come to Dallas, and then they got rid of Steph Curry's brother. Isn't he like a lights out shooter? He used to be. He kind of has fallen off. He averaged a good amount of points when he played for Brooklyn, and then when he played when he played in Brooklyn and Philly. But now in Dallas this season, he's only averaged 4 points a game. He's not getting in a lot of minutes, 12 minutes a game. So he wasn't super, inputted into this offense or into this team. And so I think the two moves, they get rid of two players. I heard that, Grant Williams was kind of butting heads with some people in the Dallas locker room, maybe because of his goofiness, or I don't know. I'm not really sure on that, but I did see that report. So maybe good for the locker room as well. And then they get a player who wasn't going to, Charlotte's never kind of done anything, in playoff success and just like building, super great players. So I'm glad PJ gets out of there. He's always been a, 12 to 15 type of guy in points. Not super reliable rebounding, but he's a pretty reliable scorer. So he comes to Dallas where they're needing height, and so I like the move for Dallas to get PJ, and then Charlotte. I don't know. I feel like they're kind of just throwing things. They're selling a little bit. I know a lot of players on the team aren't doing good. The team's never really doing good. So they get that gone, and it doesn't change anything for Charlotte. Charlotte's still going to be bad, but Dallas I think gets definitely an improvement here. So I like PJ. Another move that honestly was arguably my favorite move of the deadline. Daniel Gafford from the Washington Wizards gets moved to Dallas, and that's exactly what Dallas needed was height. And so they get a player in PJ Washington, and then they jump on and get Daniel Gafford. And so Gafford, just to jump in here real quick, he's been with Washington for, a handful of years and has kind of just continued to grow and build his game. He was first in Chicago, didn't do much, goes to Washington, and now becomes like a 10 and 8 type of guy. He'll put up 10 points, he'll get 8 boards. I like that for Dallas. They don't need a ton of more in scoring. And so they get a guy like Gafford who's has tremendous size. And yeah, so Janelle, what are your thoughts on Daniel Gafford to Dallas?
Well, Justin, looking at the Dallas Mavericks right now, their leading rebounder, Justin, is Luca, their point guard, at 9 rebounds a game. That's their leading rebounder for the Dallas Mavericks. So, absolutely, Justin, when you talk about the Dallas Mavericks, who have playoff aspirations, they have two dominant guards, two great guards in their prime. I feel like they're going to need a big time rebounder in the playoffs. When you look at the NBA playoffs, the history of the playoffs, you always need a big man to get you at least 10 clutch rebounds, 5 or 6 on the defensive side, and a couple putback layups. And I believe that Daniel Gafford is that center that the Mavericks are looking for, Justin. They definitely need some big men. When you look at the Mavericks, they're going to be playing teams in the playoffs like the Nuggets, the Clippers, the Thunder, and the Timberwolves, who have two centers, Justin, the Timberwolves. So when you look at the Mavericks, they're going to need a center to, I don't think Gafford can stop a Cat or a Nikola Jokic, but you need someone that can bother him, cause some defense and pay some Draymond Green-esque type defense on there. And, I think the Mavericks, they upgraded a little bit on their big man. And Gafford is a solid pickup. Looking at Gafford here, he is averaging 11 points per game, plus 8 rebounds a game, which is awesome. That's what the Mavericks need. Luka is averaging 8.5, 8, almost 9 a game for the Mavericks. So if you can get Daniel Gafford in as a starter, he gets worked in, he stays healthy. He can average you about 10 rebounds. If he's averaging 8, for the Wizards this past year, he can average about 10 here. Help Luka out and get that defensive side of the ball going for the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, and so they've kind of been searching for that for a while. They dived in on Christian Wood a couple of years ago. That didn't work out. And so they get Gafford and they have Washington now and they're kind of set up, as long as health stays, intact for Kyrie Irving and Luka, who's been absolutely balling. They should be set. And then just really quick looking at the Wizards, who they're not in playoff contention this year. They're not going to make it. They only have 9 wins. I don't really see what happened, like what they were going for in the trade. Rashawn Holmes was not playing any minutes for the Mavericks, so they get an older vet. So that does nothing for me. So that kind of wraps up that side. I do like Gafford, and so that was arguably my favorite move of the deadline. Another very interesting move comes between the Raptors and the Nets. Brooklyn goes out and trades for Dennis Schroeder and Thaddeus Young, and they get rid of Spencer Dinwiddie, who to me has kind of been like I mean, he hasn't done super too much, but with Brooklyn, he's kind of been there for a while. I know he left and he came back, but he's not too bad. He's averaging, 16 and a half points this season for Brooklyn. And so, or 12 and a half points for Brooklyn this season. So they get rid of him. They bring in Dennis Schroeder, who's a good vet. I think, Brooklyn's right on the outside of the play-in. And so maybe they were looking at, somebody else who could change it up and kind of get them a boost in wins. So I think it's a solid move. Thaddeus Young's kind of an older vet. Maybe it could be a mentor to a guy like Nick Claxton or something like that. But it's a fine move. Nothing crazy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he could be good. Looking at Spencer Dinwiddie, I think he did just sign with the Lakers. I think he could be good with the Lakers. We'll see. The Lakers are, they're the type of team that adds players and they just don't end up being good with them. They've signed so many great young players that Lakers have in the past 2 to 3 years that had a lot of potential and they just kind of dry out. Looking at the Nets, I'm not really sure what the Nets are going for. They have somewhat of a good team. I think you mentioned, Schroeder and Thaddeus Young. And, Thaddeus Young was good for a good amount of years, but he's just one of those players now that just get traded every year. Schroeder, you don't know what you're going to get from Schroeder. He can drop 25 or he can drop just 5, he gets very inconsistent. I do like Dinwiddie. I do think the potential of Dinwiddie is pretty good. If I was the Raptors, I probably would have kept him. Just looking at the Raptors, they really just got rid of everybody, really. I guess they're just building now around Scotty Barnes and Pascal Siakam is still pretty good. I do think that they should have just kept Schroeder maybe and see, or maybe it's a trade that could go both ways. But it is what it is, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it even more now, I'm kind of just like indifferent. I feel like nothing really changes. It's a 30-year-old guard for a 30-year-old guard. So
Yeah.
there's nothing that big. And Schroeder, I mean, this is his eighth team since 2017. So he's just constantly moved around. So I feel like he's not going to be a piece that they know they can rely on and stay because he hasn't stayed anywhere in recent years. So it's whatever. And yes, you pointed out. So Dinwiddie was waived by the Raptors, which he was traded to, and now he's joining the Lakers, which I think is an interesting move. I agree. I feel like they always get vets or somewhat known players, and then it just doesn't pan out. So I feel like this trade's probably not going to pan out for either any of the teams that were involved. Toronto's not even in the play-in right now either. So it's whatever. I just kind of want to move on from that. There's nothing too crazy out of that deal. A deal that's kind of been interesting. I feel like this player was well known in Utah, goes to Boston, has an injury-plagued time with them, never wins anything, then signs with the Charlotte Hornets. I'm talking about Gordon Hayward. He gets dealt to OKC for a deal that consists of Trey Mann. I don't even want to say this guy's name. Vasilijus Mike Mekic. I probably should have stopped there. And then Davis Bertans and some draft compensation. So they get a more well known name, the Thunder. I feel like Gordon Hayward's kind of been tucked back. He's always, I think just maybe Charlotte in itself is kind of a tucked away franchise, never doing too much to gain spotlight. He's been there since 2020, 2021, and he's been averaging 15 to 18 points a game. So he's been a solid piece for them. And now he's in OKC where, I've been listening to a lot of things, and OKC didn't need another wing, small forward as much. They needed more size with Chet Holmgren. And so I don't know if it's a deal that, was super intriguing to me. How he's 33 now, so he's getting older. But maybe they're looking for a veteran presence because they're definitely, shaped up to be in a good run in the playoffs. They're the 4 seed and only one game out from the 1 seed. So what are your thoughts with Gordon Hayward?
Yeah, Justin, looking at Gordon Hayward, we're not really sure which Gordon Hayward we're getting now. Looking at Gordon Hayward, he's had many on and off years. He was a star in Utah in his first couple years in the league. Ever since then, he had a lot of major injuries that just kept him back. I do remember when he joined Boston, he had a really bad, I think it was a knee injury that kept him out so long. I think that was the year that they brought in Kyrie Irving and Jason Tatum took off that year. Looking at the Thunder, though, here's the thing, Justin. Looking at the Thunder, they are going to need some type of veteran presence. I'm not sure if Gordon Hayward brings it to them out of all veteran players that are pretty good. But like you said, the Thunder are one game behind the first seed, and we still have 2 months and a half, maybe 2 months and a half left of this NBA season. So really anything can happen. I love the Thunder this year, Justin. They're kind of like the little bit of the Cinderella, the darling of the NBA. The new team on the block. Justin, this was a team that for the last 3 years, have had 20 something draft picks. They got Chet who missed his rookie year last year, and now he's playing. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who was a star for the past couple years. He was really good in his first years in the Clippers as well. This team is super young, Justin. I mean, super young, and they still have the potential to have the first seed in the Western Conference. When you look at this team, Shea is playing really great. He is also an MVP candidate, leading his team in 31 points per game. You're looking down the field, you have the two Williams kids who are very solid. You have Chet, you have Josh Giddey who can pass and rebound and play really all around. Dort, who's a pretty solid defensive player, and Dort himself has potential to drop 20 to 25 points some random night. So I think this team is super young, Justin, and they were just looking for really anybody to come in and pretty much bring them veteran presence. So I like it. I don't love it, but I like it for the Thunder's sake. This is going to be a very interesting team, Justin. Though, come April in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it here. Hayward is 33, right? As we mentioned, he will now be the oldest player in the Thunder. They only had one other guy over 30 in Bismack Biyombo, but he's old too, so I don't think he's put in a lot of minutes. So they're just trying to find more of a veteran guy. Yeah, totally. They have, I mean, some of their biggest performers, Giddy and Holmgren and the Jalen, the Jalen twins, even though they're not twins. And Lou Dort and Shea Gilgeous, they're all 25 or under. So that's definitely what putting it together. It's definitely what they were looking for is another vet. But I think they could have gone, probably another guy. Hayward's never won a title. They could have jumped for, I don't know, like a cheap deal, like DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah.
Trade for DeAndre Jordan. He just won with the Nuggets, something like that. Maybe a Jeff Green. So yeah, it's all right. It's nothing big. And then I guess, maybe jump into one more. I'll sprinkle in some of these. I'm a little interested in the Monte Morris to Minnesota. He'd probably be a fine role player. He was averaging 10 for Washington. Now he's in Minnesota. That's not super big. Overall, this trade deadline wasn't too juicy compared to maybe prior years. But I guess maybe one more. Doug McDermott goes to the Pacers. Any thoughts on that? I know he's kind of, he's been in San Antonio for a little while now.
Yeah, I think Doug McDermott is actually returning to the Pacers. I think he was there a couple years ago before he signed to the Spurs. Doug McDermott, he's one of those Grayson Allen type guys that could be a really good, starting shooting guard. Like for example, how the Sixers are with Buddy. They'll have superstars. I feel like Doug McDermott is the guy you can plug into a roster that has a Joel Embiid, Jokic and Murray, an Anthony Edwards and Cat. I think he's one of those guys that can be really valuable for a playoff run. It's unfortunate that he's on Indiana now. I do think Indiana could make somewhat of a playoff run. Halliburton is playing well. They made the play-in tournament. So you have to hope maybe, the the Pacers can make it somewhat of an interesting team. I do think they have Siakam now, right? Correct? I think I said Siakam was on the Raptors, but he is on the Pacers now. So I do think now they can make some type of a interesting seventh seed to challenge the Celtics in the first round, maybe the Sixers. But it could be solid, Justin. It could be solid.
Yeah, and time will tell. And they have Halliburton, so Halliburton, Siakam, I think they'll definitely be. I think they'll make top 6 seed. Now looking at it, unless Miami makes a late season run to hop them, I don't think Orlando has that, or Chicago or Atlanta. So they're kind of set firm. They probably would be at right ahead of the play-in, and so they make a move for a guy that might be a little consistent. 6 to 8, 6 to 10 points a game. So solid move. They don't give up anything. So. Yeah, so the trade deadline is come and gone. Along with that news last week, we got news of the All-Star game, which I guess I just kind of want to look at. We can talk about who we think is going to win the game, sure, but also just like these players' seasons and if it'll continue past the break. So I want to jump into just the starters. I want to jump into the starters. So on the East side, we got Giannis. Joel Embiid is out. Let me see who is his replacement? Do you know that? I'm trying to look at that off the top of my head.
They might have to put Brunson in the starting lineup. I think Trae Young is the injury replacement.
Okay.
I believe maybe they haven't announced it yet. Let me see. Yeah, it's Giannis, Tyrese, Damian Lillard, and Jason Tatum. Out of the reserves, Jalen Brunson's playing amazing, averaging 27 points, Justin, and almost 7 assists. I mean, Brunson has been a beast and a guy that I got wrong, Justin, in 2 years ago's offseason signings. I was not a big fan of Brunson leaving Dallas and joining the Knicks, but he has proved me absolutely wrong, Justin. When you look at another guy in Tyrese Maxey, who's now carrying the load for the Sixers, averaging almost 26 points now and 6.5 assists. I mean, this guy's a baller. We knew that coming out of the draft a couple years ago. He was going to be a beast. And also looking at Donovan Mitchell, a team that's a little bit under the radar, but not really, the second-seeded Cleveland Cavaliers, led by Donovan Mitchell, Justin, scoring 28 points per game. A beast. You look at the rest of that Cavs roster, pretty much loaded. But I do think maybe it could be Donovan, Tyrese Maxey, or Jalen Brunson that could replace Embiid in the Eastern Conference lineup for the All-Star game.
Yeah, and I'm very interested. Of course, Maxey and then Brunson. Those two names have been great all season. And then Mitchell has too, but of recent times, this team, the Cavs, have won 9 straight games. That is super impressive that they're finding their stride. And he obviously him and Garland are the kind of the leaders on that team. So I like, yeah, I could see them somebody replacing that. I know it's Embiid being out, so maybe Bam gets in there. I'm trying to see for sure, but it's fine. Trey, this whole team is pretty good, top to bottom. And Paolo Banchero gets in there. Scotty Barnes is now in there. So a pretty bit. Randall is out, and then Trey Young, of course, he slides in there now with the injuries. So they got a good side of for the East, and some players that we're definitely going to dive into when we talk about our little playoff predictions a little bit from here. And then on the West, we got LeBron, Luca, KD, Shea, and the Joker himself, Nikola Jokic. What a set of five. Shea has kind of definitely established himself as a star. We were talking about the Thunder a little earlier. He's averaging 31. It's just, amazing what he's doing. And then on the reserves are pretty kind of we can see Paul George, Kawhi, and AD and Steph and Booker. Nothing like too different from prior years compared to the East. So what are your thoughts on the West?
Justin, I think the West can absolutely blow out the East. I mean, looking from top to bottom, Luka Doncic, in my opinion, is tied at first with Jokic as front runners for MVP. There's many other superstars along the way, but you look at Kevin Durant in Phoenix. I'm so glad to see Kevin Durant healthy and playing as much as he can compared to past years in Brooklyn. Kevin Durant is averaging 28 points per game, so that future Hall of Famer is still around. Shea is doing great. The Thunder, you got to give Sam Presti credit for trusting the process. And hey, here the Thunder are. They're top, fighting for the first seed. LeBron, I mean, should I even say less? And Jokic, this guy Jokic is now, being talked about, Justin. When you look at the NBA, there has been so many great centers in this league from the 60s, from the 70s, from the 80s and 90s. There's been a great center in each decade. And Justin, this is the center of our decade. And now, Justin, we have to start looking at Jokic as a top 6 to 7 center of all time. This guy has been making moves. I mean, what can I say? Reigning Finals MVP, back-to-back regular season MVP. I love the Nuggets this year. We'll definitely talk about in a little bit of how we think about how the playoffs going to predict. This guy's just an all-star, becoming one of the greats of this league. You look at the reserves. I love Devin Booker, 28 per game. Steph Curry, he is leading this Warriors team. He is putting this Warriors team on the back. When you look at how Klay Thompson is struggling so bad at a pace we have never seen before. Even Klay Thompson has came back from back-to-back season injury, knee injuries, and he came back just fine, leading the Warriors to the title not that long ago. He was a great second piece, but now the Warriors are crumbling, Justin, and it's just Stephen Curry leading the way. The 35-year-old Stephen Curry leading the way. You're looking down the reserves. AD is a beast this year. I'm so happy that he is healthy as past years as he's been hurt. Anthony Edwards, I love me some Ant-Man. This guy is entertainment on and off the court. Love me some Ant-Man. I did see the movie the other day, Hustle, with Adam Sandler. Loved him in it. There's some 76ers players in there, Justin. I know you'd love to hear that. And looking to the last couple players, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard have been great. Another team that I would love to talk about later, the Clippers. A great team this year. If Kawhi Leonard can stay healthy, love them in the playoffs. Paul George can stay healthy. Love the Clippers in the playoffs. And lastly, Cat. Cat is playing so well today. This year. He scored, Justin, I think, was it 73 a couple weeks ago? Was it 60? Around that. And I love this West team, Justin. It could be a blowout.
Yeah, I mean they have some absolute stars who have been established superstars for the last handful of years. I don't think I think they're all past first timers. I mean in the All-Star game, and yeah, I'm actually one of the biggest things. I'm really glad to see Kawhi Leonard playing a lot of minutes, playing a lot of games compared to prior years in LA, and then just like we'll jump into that, but like the Clippers have just they finally look good. I don't know they've always been the little brother to the Lakers, and kind of finally having a pretty good season that they've been putting together with Harden and Russ. So I like that. Steph Curry, even though they're the 12 seed, he's still playing really well. Yeah, he's kind of playing alone. I feel like Clay's struggling. We saw his frustrations from I think he was benched near the end of the game that they won. And then Draymond always getting into Draymond fights. I saw yesterday with Yusuf Nurkic. Always, I mean, always find some sort of problem, especially with Nurkic. I know they've gotten into it before. And then it's pretty cool to see the Timberwolves are kind of making a splash in the All-Star game. You know, their team this is definitely the best they've looked, arguably in the last decade. It's cool to see Anthony Edwards and Cat and, Rudy Gobert, even though he's not in the game, he deserves some credit. So it's a really good squad. The starters are just unbelievable. I mean, Luka's averaging 34 and a half and Shea's 31. And then, Jokic, how you were talking about Jokic as a possible top 6 to 7 center. It's definitely a good point to make. He's just so versatile. I mean, 9 assists a game, 12 boards. He's almost averaging a triple double. He's, phenomenal. Before we leave this, I do want to give credit to poor Joel Embiid. He's averaging 35 a game and then he gets injured. Now he's probably not going to be included in the MVP conversation because I definitely think he'd be a favorite. But he's out for a little while. And then Maxi's picking up the slack. This is gonna be a great game. I believe it was it next week, and so yeah, All-Star games definitely a must watch. And another thing that I want to jump into what we've kind of been leading to all day with the deadline and with player performances up to the All-Star game, the playoffs. The playoffs, they start in April, but we kind of just want to talk about our early predictions through halfway through the season. I'll just give you a brief rundown of the standings a little bit before we jump into it. But Boston and Minnesota own the 1 seeds on both sides. Cleveland has now jumped up to 2nd seed after 9 straight victories. Milwaukee is 4-6 out of the last 10 games. Doc Rivers and them have been struggling a little, but they're still a 3 seed. The Knicks just made a big move with Bojan Bogdanovic, and then we saw Brunson and Randall made it to the All-Star game, so they have a lot of good pieces. Some call them the Villanova Knicks because they got all the Villanova guys. And then the Sixers, they lose Embiid for a little while. He'll be back though in time. But they got Maxey and they make a deal for Healed. And then the Pacers, they have Halliburton and Pascal Siakam. And then on the West, we'll jump into some of these teams, the Clippers, with their 4 guys, and then the Nuggets, that's reigning champs. The young OKC Thunder, the Kings are still a young, promising team, and then the Suns with KD and Book and Beal. So yeah, what is I guess like a team that you think will go up from now into the playoffs, and a team that might fall out on each side?
Man, that's a tough question, Justin. Well, let me start off with the negative. First of all, Justin, I'm a little bit down on the Bucks. I just don't like the fact that you fire your rookie head coach 43 games this season. They were 30-13, Justin. They weren't bad of a team at all. I mean, Damian Lillard was playing at a high level. So was Giannis. I just don't understand what the Bucks are doing. I just don't understand why you fire your championship-winning head coach and Bud, as they called him in Milwaukee, and then they bring in Adrian Griffin, who was a solid pickup. I think he was an assistant under Nick Nurse in Toronto. And they just let him go after 43 games, and I just don't understand why. And then they bring in Doc Rivers, who personally, if I'm the Bucks, I'm gonna stick with the assistant coach, just because you went through a whole training camp with him, you played 43 games, and now you're bringing a guy who was probably on the other side of the country commentating a game and rush him in and expect him by All-Star game to have everything. And not to mention, Doc Rivers is coaching the All-Star game, is what I'm reading here. Which, the Bucks, I'm just down on them. I would see in the East, it's a little bit weak. It's not as strong as the West is, but I feel like the Bucks could have had the best chance in challenging the number 1 seeded Celtics, but I just think that the Celtics mentally, they're a little bit better than the Bucks, Justin. So that's one team I'm down on is the Bucks. Now, a team that I love so far, Justin, I have a few that I love. I don't know where to start. An honorable mention real quick. I will say Philadelphia, Justin. I don't mean to kiss up to you, my man. I know you love the Sixers, but I love the Sixers this year. And many years prior, I did not like the Sixers when they had Brett Brown as head coach and they had Doc Rivers for a couple years and they brought in Harden. I like this Sixers team now. I feel like under Nick Nurse, they're pretty good. You know, Maxey and Embiid comes back with Buddy. That'll be a nice team. Looking down at the West, here, all the teams that I love, Justin, are all in the West. And I do think the West might be the champion this year, maybe. However, I love the Thunder a little bit. I love the Kings to after All-Star break to I guess make a little bit of a push. They're only a couple games back of the one seed as well. I'm gonna be basic here and go with the Clippers and the Nuggets. Now, every time there's a champion, Justin, and they keep that same core, that team is always going to remain competitive. You look at teams like the Warriors that were winning. You know, the teams without KD, they'd go to the first time they went to the finals, they went back the next year, and then they went back the next year. So teams like that win this championship, they're always going to be in contention to return to the finals. So I do love the Nuggets to possibly end up with the first seed or the second, and I love the Clippers. Now, when they first got Harden, they were struggling big time. I think they went 0-5, and then they won a game, and Harden let them know, okay, once we get this figured out, you're done. All of you are done. So if they can have Kawhi healthy, you know, this time in the playoffs, Kawhi always gets hurt and he's done. So if they have Kawhi and Paul George and you know, Harden all together, and you know, they'll have Russell and they'll have guys like Norman Powell coming off the bench. So I love the Clippers. That might be the Western Conference Finals, but I don't want to leave the Timberwolves out yet, Justin, as they are the number one seed under Chris Finch as head coach. Not the most attractive I guess, caliber superstar coaches. But hey, Chris Finch is leading his team up there. Ant's playing great. They have two anchors in Cat and Rudy Gobert. So I love, Justin, to answer your question, I love the top four teams because any one of them can make a pretty good playoff run in a Western Conference run. But don't forget about the Suns and the Kings. Don't leave them out yet. The Kings do have playoff experience from last year. And, you know, I think it's going to be a pretty tight Western Conference championship this year, as well as the semifinals before the Western Conference. It's going to be really tight, and I'm excited to see who ends up there. Love the Nuggets, love the Clippers, and the Kings. So don't rule out the Kings.
Yeah, you know, and I think a lot of the teams still have a very strong shot, no matter where they are. Still got a handful of games left. I've kind of been off of the Kings. I know they're the fifth seed now. They had a really big, you know, momentum push last year before losing in the first round, and I think, you know, to the Warriors, and so I just don't think they're the same team anymore. You know, I mean, they're 30-21. They're 4.5 games from, you know, the top four teams, so they still have it. But I'm a little nervous for them, and then obviously those injury prone teams like the Suns and the Clippers they always kind of give you some pause. You know, I mean, the Clippers have been playing absolutely phenomenal, and if they can
Yeah.
keep it going, I mean, I hate to give, you know, history so much, you know, weight, but that team has always kind of found a way to lose, especially now with Harden and Russ. They're known for not being championship guys. And so I kind of want to lean towards history here, even though they look so good of recent times. And then in the East, you could say the same about the Knicks, but I feel like they look like a better team. Last year, I was kind of big on the Cavs to make a possible run, and they didn't. They lost in the first round. But, you know, I think maybe that team was just a year early for making a big run. Now they have another year under their belts from when I was thinking about them. So I like the Cavs. They're the number 2 seed, so they have, you know, picking of their choice. And then, you know, last year we saw the Heat come from the play-in all the way up to what was it, to the finals.
Finals. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're definitely someone you cannot count out. They don't have Kyle Lowry anymore, which is kind of a little bit of a breaking news. He signed with the Sixers today, I believe this morning.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
could be a good piece. They got rid of Beverly, so maybe they slide in Kyle Lowry. So I like that for Philly. I do like Philly as a good squad. Nick Nurse has always been a pretty good coach. You know, he won with Toronto a handful of years ago. And so Philly's a pretty dangerous team. And then I will never count out Miami. They just paid Eric Spoelstra some big bucks to be there for a long, long time. And then they have Jaime Jaquez, who has been, you know, great rookie play for them. and
Oh yeah.
Terry Rozier. They got him from Charlotte, and so Miami's a good team. Another one, a team in the East though that maybe I'm kind of more down on that I like to talk about is probably the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm probably on the same page as you
Yeah.
there. Um, there just doesn't seem like a lot is fitting into a good season for them. So I'm not big on that team to make a big run. That I mean, you have Giannis and you have Dame. You would think that's all you need, but it's more. Coaching is such a big importance. So I'm kind of off of Milwaukee, and that's going to lead me to asking you a question. If you had to select today a finals between two teams, of course, who are you picking to make it?
Well, Justin, looking at the Eastern Conference Finals, I think it's Boston's conference to run away with. I don't think, if the Bucks still had their coach of last year and Mike Budenholzer, I'd love them to win. I'm going to go with Boston. They're 40-12 right now, and they have a pretty good starting lineup. Their bench is a little questionable, which I think they can fix along into the playoffs. But when you have Jason Tatum, who's a superstar, and Jalen Brown and Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, those four players, if they're healthy in the playoffs, they're going to take out any team in the East. So I like the Boston Celtics to come out of the East, and I do like the Denver Nuggets to meet them back up. Look, like I mentioned, when a team reaches the final for the first time and they win it, the next year I feel like they are just as good, maybe a little better, and because they're a little wiser, they understand now, and they're more, I guess, a little bit more hungry, Justin. So I love the Denver Nuggets. Now, part of me wants to go with the Clippers, but like you mentioned, a strong point about the past and each player on the Clippers on how they always come up short in the playoffs. So I do think I like the Clippers to lose to the Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals in 7 games. When you look at the Nuggets, Justin, this team is just solid all around. Mike Malone has established himself now as a top 5 head coach in the league. Jokic is, as I mentioned, going to now a top 7 center in this history of this league. Jamal Murray's a solid point guard. You have Porter, you have Gordon. I love Brown on the bench. Christian Brown. And I just think that the Nuggets are more mature than the Timberwolves, than the Clippers, than the Thunder, than the Kings. They demolished the Suns last year in 6 games. Uh, I just love the Nuggets on what they're doing. I think they're going to be a team to reckon with now in the West now going forward. They are the Spurs now. I believe they are the Spurs of the Western Conference. You have Jokic, Tim Duncan. Jamal Murray gives me a lot of Tony Parker vibes, comparisons. And Gordon and Michael Porter carry that Ginobili-esque feel, and they play really good defense. So I love the Nuggets and the Celtics to meet up. If I have to pick a winner, I'm going with the Nuggets in 7. I think this year in the playoffs all around, there's going to be a lot more game 7s, I feel like. I think last year was a little on and off. The Nuggets kind of dominated. They swept the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, and then they beat the Nuggets or the Heat in 5. So I think this year is going to be a little bit more tighter. I do like the Nuggets to win 7-game series all around. The first year they'll probably win in 5. The first round they'll probably win in 5. And then, as the rounds go up, I think the Nuggets will prevail and go back-to-back champions with Jokic winning the Finals MVP. But I would not rule out Jamal Murray. Justin, last year in the Western Conference Finals, Jamal Murray torched the Lakers himself and didn't even get the Western Conference Finals MVP. So I like Jamal Murray to go into this playoffs a little bit more motivated, and the Nuggets will go back-to-back.
Wow, that's a good call. I want to be a little different because I do really like that. I think those are two of my favorites. I do want to keep Boston as a my finals team from the East. With Tatum and Brown kind of putting things together again. They kind of they thought they were going to have it last year. They didn't, but this year I don't know that they're averaging 120 points per game. They have a pretty solid defense, compared to the rest of the league. And so I think Boston's going to make it in the East. And I'm going to give you a different team in the West from any of the teams you said, actually. I'm incorporating some things about injury, the likelihood of the Clippers and the Suns kind of going down to some injury. Otherwise, I'd really love both teams to be possible champions. And then the Nuggets, they are just, the most well-run team out of any in the NBA. And so I definitely love them to be in the Western Conference Finals, and they're going to go against the Timberwolves in the finals. I think it's going to be the 1 seed versus the 1 seed. Timberwolves are going to pull it out. I think they're just a different team than they've been that we've ever seen. They have great scoring. They got two big boy centers. You can't lock up Jokic. You can only hope to contain him. Uh, and so putting Gobert on him might be a really tougher matchup for Jokic in the playoffs. And also, the Timberwolves have the best defense in the NBA. They allow the least points per game at 107. And so defense is what they're going to bring here. And so I think it's going to be a Timberwolves Boston, and I'm gonna go Boston though. They've been, itching for that, since Tatum has joined. They've kind of been always around that, that discussion. And so I believe Boston is going to go in there and kind of I think they're going to take over the East pretty handily compared to any prior years. And so Boston's going to jump in there. Timberwolves are going to have a very tough fight, but they're going to make it to the finals, but kind of run out of gas compared to Boston. And Boston's going to win in 6. So yeah, so we're aligned with Boston making a good run. And then the Nuggets is absolutely great take. I could totally see them there. I have them in the Western Conference Finals. So, only time will tell. We got the All-Star game coming up next week, and then it's the second half of the NBA season, and then the playoffs. And you'll see more of us for that. This is just a briefing, so when we go back and we were right, we can tell you we did so in early February. So, yep. And so that's our show. You have any other things you want to talk about with this season?
Well, I just want to give a little bit of a shout out to my lovely Rockets, my baby Rockets who are struggling. Let's hope maybe they can push through and make a late play-in tournament appearance. I just want to say, guys, Alfred Sengun is playing great. He was kind of snug for the All-Star game, but hey, I'm a homeboy. I'm always loving my teams when they're good, when they're bad. That's one thing about me and both of us here at Doing Sports. We love our teams when they're bad and they're good because hey, one day one of our teams, Justin, is going to win a championship, and we want to say we're there for the bad as well as the good. So I just want to give my Rockets a shout out. But other than that, Dewey Nation, it was fun discussing basketball. I cannot wait to do it for until summer, until we get into NFL, which we'll mix in here and there. But yeah, Justin, I think this first basketball episode went great. Hey, it's going to be a really interesting 2.5 months till we get to the playoffs. But for now, we'll enjoy the rest of the regular season as well as our star break.
Most definitely. We are, very well known for our football content, but we love to bring out our love for basketball too. We talked about we've always been Rockets homers, but we just love the league wide everything to cover. So we'll be back more with this along with NFL content. The Super Bowl is today that you'll see. So we're hyped about that. Our episode is on YouTube that we talked about it this past week. So please go and take a listen. If you're placing bets, you're definitely going to want to listen to what we got to say. And then also, it's the last day of NFL football. So for the next, handful of months. So enjoy that today, everybody. And then enjoy the second half of the NBA season. You're going to see our face a lot more, like it or not. So we are very excited to continue to talk about what we love. And so excited. And yeah, y'all have a good day, Dwayne Nation. And call us out, Genoa.
Dewey Nation, you guys have a good one. Stay safe.